It is the home to the Toronto Blue Jays. Now, for those of you who don't know, it's a baseball team, and they're having a bit of a struggle. We did make the playoffs after 22 years out of the playoffs. We're having a bit of a struggle in the second round, but I'm proud of the team and very optimistic about tonight's result, which is kind of one of those do-or-die things. We're at our best when it comes to do-or-die things. And we're proud for a number of reasons. We're proud, of course, because it's our team. But we're also proud because, notwithstanding affection for Americans, which we have lots of, it gives us just that tiniest little bit of satisfaction to beat them at their so-called national pastime. And so we're going to work away at that tonight, but that is something that I'm very proud of as well. I want to make just sure as well that I acknowledge beyond my colleague, Councillor Michael Thompson from the City of Toronto, and he's chair of our Economic Development Committee, and Michael Williams, who runs that as our senior public servant in charge of the economic development area of the city, which includes culture as well. I want to acknowledge the presence of my wife. Everybody's got a boss. Well, my wife, Barbara Hackett, is here, and my brother, who is here with his wife, Jennifer Talbot, and my brother, Michael Tory. He is, we lost him from Canada about 25 years ago, and he lives here in London and does business here, and so it's always been good to be able to keep up to date with what's going on here through him and through many other friends that we have. I just want you to know that the people in this room, I'm not going to sort of rhyme off the names, you know each other better than I know many of you, but you are important collectively, as will be many of the other people that we'll meet in the next couple of days, to our well-being as a city and to our well-being going forward to the growth of our great city and our great country, of which we're very proud. Nobody can represent our country better than Gordon Campbell does, His Excellency the High Commissioner, and we had very fruitful meetings with him this afternoon, as we will do again tomorrow, because he's been very helpful to us in terms of making sure that we see some of the right people as we go about trying to learn, because we have a lot to learn about transportation, about infrastructure, and we had an excellent meeting today with the Secretary of State for Transportation, Mr. McLaughlin, and we learned a lot about Crossrail and some of the things that are happening very successfully with that, and some lessons learned as well. And we're here to talk financial services. Janet Ecker, my friend Janet Ecker, who's a former finance minister in the province of Ontario. She's now the CEO of the Toronto Financial Services Alliance. Please see her if you wish to come and invest in Toronto, because we'd be happy to have you. Together, we're all here to learn and to spread the word. I was elected about a year ago. In one more month, it'll be a year that I took office. And I think, to be candid, that our reputation on the global stage had been suffering for a number of years prior to that. I have no idea what all that chuckling is about, but let's put it this way. The focus was not on our strengths and on what we have to offer to the world. It was on other distractions and other embarrassments that don't do very well when it comes to trying to make sure that people think about the city the way we would want it to be thought about. And so one of the things I've been trying to do is to reestablish trust at home, because that's obviously important. If you're going to try and build a city, it starts with the people who are there, the enterprises and the people, but also rebuilding public trust abroad. And it's a gradual process, but I care very much about this work. I know, and the people who are with me from Toronto, and those of you who are expats, as it were, from Toronto, know that it's the home to immense talent, to fierce determination, to people who believe in the city and believe in what it's capable of, and that part never diminished during the time when there were other distractions. And of course, many of the people in this room are people who epitomize that in their day-to-day activities. And so we have to go about doing not only that, but also addressing some of the very practical realities that affect a lot of cities in common. And one of the reasons I'm so much looking forward to meeting Mayor Boris Johnson tomorrow, and I've acknowledged already publicly in Toronto, just for the record, that he has better hair than I do. There may be a number of areas in which he's better, but the bottom line is that I really believe I can learn from him. I believe I can learn from him with respect to the experience to date, and I know we have continuing challenges here in this city with respect to traffic and public transportation, but there are some steps forward that have been taken, especially when it comes to the Crossrail project. I want to know more about that, because we are similarly embarked on a project like that that is all about the same thing. It's all about allowing people to move around the city, because you can't have the freedom of enterprise that you need, you can't have access to the talent that you need if you don't connect people to opportunity. And one of the problems people have when they're getting around is oftentimes they will give up on seeking out an opportunity or even accepting an opportunity because they can't get there in a practical, humane way. And so that's a top priority of ours, and I'm going to be asking him a lot about that tomorrow, as I did Mr. McLaughlin today. And I think, for example, we're going to go tomorrow and see the beginnings of the transit hubs that really represent what Crossrail is going to feature. It isn't just about a station where people get on and off a train, but it's an entire sort of holistic concept that says at that place where there happens to be a transit hub, there will also be retail, there will also be commercial, there will also be residential. And I think there even is the opportunity for us to look beyond that and perhaps very well locate some social services in that immediate environment, certainly in the Toronto experience, where you could say have people find their childcare close by the transit hub, because that's a reality of their life, is that they're coming and going from work. And I think that there's some progress that's been made here when it comes to the Crossrail experience that's going to help to educate us in that regard. The other thing, obviously, that I have to focus on affordable housing, and I'm going to ask Mayor Johnson about that tomorrow, because again, it's a challenge in big cities. I recognize the fact, and I'm very gratified at the fact that in Toronto, it is increasingly being recognized now as an economic issue by some of the senior business leaders, because I think before it was maybe viewed as a social issue and confined to that. But the ability of people who work in jobs that don't pay a very high income to access housing within reasonable proximity of their job is a fundamental economic issue. Here and there. I'll only speak for Toronto, and I know it's going to be important to us going forward that we come up with some other and better answers with respect to how we're going to make available affordable housing to people in what is an increasingly expensive global city, as is, of course, the case here. The other thing that I obviously have to focus myself on, with the help of Councillor Thompson and others, is competing for investment. And I'm here not to make some kind of naked sales pitch. I'm not going to stand up here for the rest of the short time I have and recite facts and figures to you. I can recite a few of those in answer to a couple of questions if you have any. But the bottom line is, we know that we are competing for economic growth. We are competing for the innovators and the risk takers who we need to come to our city. And fortunately, many of them need to be in more than one place. So they can be in London as well as being in Toronto. And we're going to try and make the case over and over again that they should be in Toronto, because it is at one and the same place in the North American continent, but certainly within Canada, it is the innovation center of Canada and it is the financial center of Canada, all in one place. Whereas in the United States, you have, I think most people accept, the innovation center of the countries on the West Coast and the financial centers on the East Coast. In Toronto, you can come and have the whole package in one place. I want you to know one more thing that maybe is a little more personal to me. I come from business. While I have done all those different jobs, I mean, the one you might have shaken your head at is talk show host, but I will say it commends itself to you in some respects. I ended up doing it because somebody came after I was finished being the leader of the opposition in the provincial legislature and said, would I like to try doing a talk show? And I sort of thought that would be fun, and it was fun. And the most fun part of it was, and this is something that I would commend to you who have stressful jobs, is that like everything in life nowadays, the talk show is controlled by a mouse that is held by the person who's the host. And when somebody was getting perhaps a bit tiresome or a bit adversarial, it only took the exertion of that much energy, and they were just gone. It's the most amazing thing. And I would thank them very politely for being gone, but nobody knew I'd sort of, before they had a chance to even respond to my thanking them, they were gone. So I'd commend that to you. But what I thrived on was when I was a CEO of two big communications companies in Canada. And the part that I thrived on wasn't just that business, which of course is a business like many, like almost all today, that are faced with constant and very rapid change. But I thrived on the accountability, the daily accountability that came, and the knowledge that at the end of every quarter, because it's a big public company, that I would have to go in front of the investors and the shareholders and the lenders and others and explain our results to them. And I thrived on that, and I still do. I bring that to the office of mayor, which I think is something that I hope will make a difference over time. I understand from business and from elsewhere, because it's in my DNA, I guess, that a dollar has to be earned before it can be taxed. And so that brings to me and with me a certain discipline that I hope will continue to be exercised going forward. I intend for it to be so as we work. And I know from working in a regulated business how frustrating arbitrary government can be, because they oftentimes have a valid public policy purpose that they are trying to pursue, but they pursue it in a way that sometimes is done without asking the people who are affected, and thus end up having precisely the kind of opposite effect to what they'd intended. And so I just want you to know those things about me as I occupy the office that I now occupy, which is a huge privilege. And it's a privilege because it is a city that is not only a center for talent and innovation, that is not only the financial capital of Canada, that is not only a city that has a fabulous system of public post-secondary education, boasting among the highest rates of enrollment in the world, but we are also a place that is very diverse, and we're very proud of that. We're very proud of the fact that we have established that it is possible in the world, in this complicated world in which we live, to come together from all over the world. 50% of the people who live in Toronto, 50%, were born outside the country. And regardless of their faith or their nationality or their skin color or their sexual orientation, we have established a city, while not perfect, which has nonetheless embraced everybody who's come and said, we have an obligation here to embrace one another and to get the best we can out of each other to build a great city together. And I think that while, again, there are other places that are trying to do the same thing as we are, that there are none, I don't think, that are doing it any better. And that is an important part of what has allowed us to build ourselves up and to become a magnet for people. I will also say that we're a strong North American city, but with a distinctly Canadian personality. And I'm of the view that while we represent a gateway to North America and the world, that there is no place, in my view, that you, as people, I'll refer to you as people who are in business here in Britain, in the United Kingdom, there's no place you could feel more at home than to come to Canada and do business. And I know that as people go about finding places in the world to do business, it's important that you start off by being able to feel at home. And I guarantee you, those who don't have any direct experience with spending any longer periods of time in Canada, that you will feel at home. There are 700 companies here, and we're proud of that, in this country at least, but there's 700 by latest count doing business, many of them, of course, right here in London. There are thousands of employees. We heard from the Minister today how involved some of those companies are, for example, our pension funds, in infrastructure projects taking place right now, right here in the city, and we're proud of that. And we'd like to sort of provide the opportunity for more of those companies to come here, but we also would like to, we know it's a two-way street. And we want to provide as much opportunity as possible for companies here in the UK to come and do business and expand themselves and expand their operations and find new opportunities for themselves in Canada, because we know that's an important part of a two-way relationship. We're going to go tomorrow to Canary Wharf. We're going to go to the Technology Accelerator there. We're going to see the work that's being done there, not only with respect to the transportation and the Crossrail transit hub that's emerging there, but also just with respect to making sure we can establish ourselves as good a home for innovators and risk takers as we possibly can in Canada. And so I want to just conclude by saying to you that we're going to be focused on all the things I've talked about. And you know, my campaign advisors, and they're wise people, said to me, if there's more than 5 things, the number of fingers you have in one hand that you're sort of running on and that you're going to focus on, no different than being a CEO or a business person, if there's more than 5 of them, you won't do well. In my case, it was traffic and transportation, because they're vital social and economic issues. It's affordable housing. I've talked about that earlier, being both a vital and a social and economic issue. It's our financial management and making sure we keep taxes low, because that's a fundamental part of making sure our people can continue to live there, but also that we can attract business and investment. It is the relationships we have with the other governments that are again, so important in our system, as it is the case here, that you have to work together in partnership with one another. And then finally, it's jobs. Because in the end, the best way in which you're going to make sure you can lift people up, and we have a similar challenge to London and many other cities and many other places in the world. We have a very welcoming environment. We do embrace people, but there are still far too many people on the outside looking in. And there is a gap that is there, and you know, it's not growing as rapidly as it might be some other places, but it is growing nonetheless. And that has to be of concern, and is of profound concern to me as mayor. But I recognize the fact that the best way to close that gap, the best way, is not a government program per se, but it is making sure that we create the environment in which risk takers and investors and wealth creators come and create new jobs and opportunity in our community, that those people, and then it's up to us to hook those people up to those who find themselves on the outside looking in. And I just want you to know that too is a fundamental priority of mine going forward, because Canadian values, and we share a lot of this DNA in common. Canadian values say that that is the first and foremost thing that you care about, is equal access to opportunity for all of your people so that they can do better for themselves and for their families. And because it's all hands on deck. going forward, we need every ounce of energy and strength and ingenuity that every single Canadian and those to come can produce in order for us to build the kind of country we want to build. And so I say thank you for the relationship we already have between our two countries. I say thank you to the Chamber and to the High Commission for bringing you together tonight so that I could have a chance to meet and talk to you. Most of it's to be about informal conversation. I apologize for the length of these remarks, but I was suggested I might just see about taking a few questions just so people could hear on some of the things that you might be most interested in, what I would have to say about those, and then we'll get back to eating, drinking, and getting ready for a great baseball game tonight. Thank you.